So, I watched the One Piece live action by Netflix. And I have to say, truth be told, it was decent. Yes, I'm going to admit. The One Piece live action. Finally, a live action by Netflix that's not horrible. And I'm sort of happy for that. I have fears, but I'm happy for that. For once, after so many live actions done by Netflix, by anime, finally we have one that doesn't make me cringe the entire time. Now, it wasn't without cringe, and I do have a lot of issues with it, but at the same time, I think overall, walking away from this series of 8 episodes, 1 hour each, my gosh, it took forever to get through this entire thing, I was pleased by what I got. Now, this is from the perspective of somebody that has consumed zero, pretty much zero, of One Piece. I have not watched the anime, I have not read the manga, so I don't have any perspective here. I'm sure the big One Piece fans are probably going to find a lot of issues with this, and I can tell that just because there's certain aspects of it that feel sort of soulless, and I'm sure a lot of that soullessness is because, honestly, thankfully, they took a lot of the charm out of it that you would typically get from an anime. Like, I don't even have to watch One Piece and know that there's a lot of charm missing here. Just based on the brief snippets I've seen and different clips and whatnot of One Piece, I know that show has a lot of charm, and there's a lot of reasons why people love it so much. But, yes, from the perspective of somebody that has nothing to do with One Piece, I can say it was a decent watch. So, I guess for those that have never watched One Piece, it's probably a selling point right there, but I'll leave it to all the big One Piece official knowledge bases to say if it's a good show or not. This is just me from a vantage point of an outsider. Now, I will say, and credit to them, my desire to read and / watch the One Piece animated series has been increased a bit. I kind of want to get into the story because I think what sort of sold me from watching this series is at least that I kind of like the setup that it has. There's a lot more to the story than I originally thought. Of course, I assumed this has a lot to it because the fandom's massive, and there's a lot of episodes / chapters, so there's gotta be a lot to the story. But honestly, there was a lot of, like, open doors to, like, the aspects of the devil fruits, which I honestly didn't know was a thing until I watched this series. It makes sense to why Luffy is made of rubber, apparently. But like I said, overall, I enjoyed it. Story-wise, I think it did solid. I think my big takeaway that I got from this, again, is the core story, which I thought was a lot more interesting than I originally thought. But I think what they did really good here, and I think it is technically to the tribute of the original story, I think they covered, like, if you watch the anime, like 45 episodes with these 8 episodes. And granted, again, these are hour-long episodes. What they did really good was not have the cast too big. I think that's probably Oda's design, was this idea of kind of introducing these characters and really quickly getting into their stories. I really felt like Luffy had a really decent kind of backstory and a build-up to his character. Nami, very tragic, really great build-up to her character. Zoro, I think, is fantastic. While simple, it makes sense to a swordsman and does give him a lot of driving force to being the best swordsman ever. Sanji, I think his story itself really does play in along with Zeph, which I thought was pretty awesome as well. I actually got emotional with the later part of Sanji and Zeph's story. It did a really good job of kind of introducing all these characters. I thought it was a very solid cast. And while not all the villain characters I felt too much for, like Arlong, I believe it makes sense why he is the way he is. I always appreciate a villain that you can understand, despite the fact that you can't agree with them. Garp was pretty solid as well. Buggy, I think, was just one of the very few charming aspects of the series. A villain character that's over the top, zany, but not too cringy. Helmut Poe, I kind of assumed that he was going to be a redeemed character at some point. Overall, I think the cast is really solid. And again, it plays into the story itself, which did very well. Now, with those characters themselves, I think overall, the cast themselves, I think, did a good job here. There was a lot of side characters that I didn't think they pulled it off. Like, there's always a balance here, because sometimes it doesn't, because anime itself, because manga, because Japanese mediums themselves don't translate very well to live action, even for Japan. When they make live actions, it doesn't translate, because anime, manga, and everything is very over the top. Expressions are very over the top. A lot of its charm and storytelling is done through the character and their expressions. Luffy, based on what very little I know of, is an overly expressive character. Very jolly character. And to translate that into an actor, it doesn't work very well. It looks very cringy. But like I said at the very beginning of this video, one thing that I do appreciate with this live action is that they don't try to be too much anime. They try to tone that back a little. There is still some goofy, silly moments, and Luffy still is over the top. He's not too much. They didn't take it too far to the point where it just looks dumb. Now, there is still points of the series that gets a little cringy, but they still do a good job of kind of dialing that back. It's not too much. But at the same time, what that does is it sort of removes a lot of the charm. I don't really feel much for these characters and their relationships. There was a few points where I felt like it was a band of crew. Like, this crew was together. They're sticking through everything, trying to keep them together. He looks out for his friends, and they seemingly claim most of the time that they look out for each other as well. But unfortunately, I never felt like these characters logically should be watching out for each other's back. And I'm not sure if that's because they're trying to cram so much into a short runtime. Yes, technically 8 hours is a long runtime, but for the story itself, which is very long, it's different. I think overall, what I do appreciate about the characters and their chemistry is really around how Luffy sort of brings dreams and desires out of people. And I think they did that very well of kind of nailing that with every single one of these characters. What is your dream? Okay, seek out your dream. What is your dream? Seek out your dream. Luffy has seemingly an infectious nature about himself of pulling that desire to seek one's dreams out of people. And that's seemingly why they follow him. Additionally, I do like the fact that later on they start getting more into the concept of basically the old guard, the old farts, kind of passing the baton to the younger generation. That was a nice little kind of thing they threw in there in the later parts of it that I did kind of appreciate. Visually, I thought it was fantastic. I think the backdrops, the props they set, they made a lot of stuff for this. They made like an entire ship. They did a great job of really realizing this world. It's a very grounded world, but at the same time, it's got that over the topness to the designs and everything. I think my only really problem comes from the sets and the costumes and stuff like that, is that some of the characters, especially a lot of the side characters, they look like they grab random people off the street and had them do cosplay. Like in the mansion, in Kaya's mansion, there was 2 individuals, I don't remember their names. They just look dumb. Nothing against the actors and actresses, just the choices there for costume and how they presented themselves just look like they just grabbed a random cosplayer that just doesn't know how to do cosplay and then threw them inside the room and said, hey, start fighting. There is some points throughout the series, while the main cast does a good job, while a lot of the villains do a good job, there's a lot of these side characters that just feel like they're just not ready for this job, or they're not being directed properly. Like, somebody in the directing team took the day off and they just said, hey, we need to film a fight scene, put something together. So it's very off and on when sometimes it just works, and then other times it just feels like it's sloppy and it's thrown together. But that all said, though, like, a lot of the fight scenes were really great. And yes, admittedly, most of that is around Zoro. I think Zoro overall is my favorite character. Like, he's the only one that just doesn't feel like a cartoon character trying to be made into live action. Zoro just seems like a badass. He just wrecks stuff. Even with him putting the sword in his mouth, he still kind of pulls it off. I mean, hats off to the actor, and hats off to what they did with the choreography and with him. He just kicks butt. I think Sanji is pretty close as well, but just a really good job with Zoro. I think overall, every fight scene that he's in is really phenomenal. Luffy, for the most part, I think most of his fight scenes are pretty awesome. They just did a really good job of kind of creating this very rubbery character. They didn't rely on it too much, and I think that's probably for the good. This idea of not trying to make too much special effects with his rubberiness, just kind of keep it for those pinnacle points to fight back with. Even Buggy, who's literally comes apart into 100 pieces, they did a good job with him. He just actually felt like a real character. I think early on when they first revealed him, I was like, ugh, okay, that cringe factor is starting to hit. But I think overall they did a really good job with him. I think the actor just pulled off his character. And even Arlong was a really solid character as well. They did a good job overall with all these characters. I think maybe Alvida, I think, was a little bit cringy as well. To give people a perspective of my thoughts overall on live actions, when you're taking something from a Japanese medium, don't try to make it one for one. I think they did a good job of here of kind of balancing the fandom, giving the fandom what they want, a true adaptation, but also dialing it back a little bit. But I've always been a fan of the idea of, yes, you can take this stuff from Japanese medium and make them into a live action, but make it its own thing. That's what I say with All You Need Is Kill, when they did that with Live, Die, Repeat. They just made it their own thing. It's nowhere near as tragic as the original story. I highly recommend checking out All You Need Is Kill. It's absolutely phenomenal. But Live, Die, Repeat, as a standalone, did its job. They made a Hollywood movie out of it, and it was solid. Because they took a lot of what doesn't translate into the West and just kind of got rid of it. And truth be told, I think that's something that's kind of impossible to do with One Piece. It's just you can't make it its own thing. It has to be One Piece. So I honestly believe they did the next best thing, which is to just dial it back a little bit. It's just it lost a lot of that charm because of that. It doesn't feel like these characters are friends. It doesn't feel like this is a crew that's coming together. For the most part, a lot of the emotional scenes and the moments where the characters get really serious, it just doesn't hit. Like, again, I don't know really much of One Piece, but I do know the iconic scene where Luffy puts the hat on somebody's head. It didn't really pull it off. Like, Luffy, when he's serious in this series, just, I don't get it. It just doesn't feel like it hits. I don't see that anger. I don't see that seriousness in the actor. And again, it's probably nothing to do with the actor themselves. I think for what they were given, these actors did a good job. It just, on one hand, doesn't translate, and on the other hand, it's just somebody's not really hitting it. But yeah, special effects, decent. Practical effects and the backdrops and the settings and everything's great. Cinematography. Do you want to call it that? I'm not a live action movie buff here, so pardon my terms here. The term, I think, would be cinematography. So one of the reasons why I've sort of gotten sick of a lot of Western storytelling, live actions, and movies is because I'm getting sick of the direction they're going with how they film things. And one of those issues that I constantly have is certain choices that bugs the fire out of me. And it's all over the place in here. It really does feel like somebody is trying to be artistic with the series, and it bugs the fire out of me. One prime example, to all the directors out there, if you ever want me to watch one of your movies, which, like you care, stop with the face up, the camera up in the face shots. I'm so sick of it, and this has so much of it. I don't need to see what's in the person's nose. Just have decent shots. You don't have to get right up in there in their nose. Please, stop it. And they did it so much in this, and I hate it. And the other problem that they have with the series is there's so many points in which it's almost like they hand it off to somebody else, and they just try to do something artistic, and it doesn't work. It doesn't feel consistent. I guess the best way to put it. This series, throughout it, it's like 95% of the time it's consistent. The flow of the shots, the angles and stuff, the choices, the overall visual feel of it is consistent. But then you have that remaining time, which is, it feels like somebody's trying to get a Grammy or something, and so they're trying to do something super creative, and it falls on its face. Good example for you. When Luffy and them are trying to go to find themselves a ship, they have this shot where they're in this town, and suddenly, for some reason, it cuts to really close up to the character's face with a fisheye angle. And everything is massively blurred behind them. Like, the perspective itself is so hyper-focused on just the characters. And then they do that fisheye panning to different characters. Again, it's completely inconsistent with the rest of the show, and it just feels weird. It feels almost nauseating. And they did this a couple times throughout the series. Like I said, it's just like, for some reason out of nowhere, we suddenly were trying to figure out how many boogers are in the person's nose. Did they clip their nose hairs that morning? I don't need to see that. It's like somebody in the crew watched Gohan stuff here recently. But anyhow, that all aside, overall, like I said, solid show. This is a great step in the right direction for Netflix. I will criticize Netflix when I want to criticize Netflix. I will praise Netflix when they deserve praise. And this is a great step in the right direction. I didn't like Cowboy Bebop. I didn't like Death Note. I've never really enjoyed live actions from them. And this is the first one where I'm like, that was enjoyable. Is it something that I would tell people to go out of their way to go watch? Probably not. It's going to be one of those ones where it's like, just go watch the anime. Like if I could if it weren't for the fact that I need to cover this for the sake of covering it because people are going to be curious about it, I'd probably skip it and just go watch the anime. It's probably better time spent. But at the same time, again, it's a decent watch. I am very curious at this point if this is something that's going to be a one-off and they're never going to do anything again, because obviously they spent a lot of money producing this, and at the same time, I don't know that they're going to be continuing it just because of how much time it required for them to work alongside the original creator. I was talking to some individuals on Discord today, and I kind of assume my prediction would be that since they do possibly have the rights for this, they would want to continue to keep going if it does well enough. But I don't think they're going to spend as much money as they did in this first season. They may just kind of dial back how much they're putting into it, and probably, unfortunately, kick Oda out of the picture. You know, just get the author out of the picture, that way they can produce it faster. Because otherwise it could become a very massive money sink. But we'll see. I'd be very curious if this is something that continue on or not. But either way, again, that's my thoughts on One Piece live action by Netflix. Never thought I'd see the day that I wasn't completely puking at the sight of a live action by them. But anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure that like button down below, comment, let me know what's thought of the series if you're going to be checking it out. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button's good on my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top list. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you want to support the channel more and you like this content, I have a Patreon link, tips link, super thanks, membership button down below. Greatly appreciate what it does, and y'all take care.